Thank you. Okay, this is the this is a special Woodbridge Board of Finance meeting because our regular date was moved, which makes it a special meeting. And it's May 22nd, 2014. Okay, the first item on the agenda is public comments. And while there's no public comments, I just wanted to make a few remarks about this famous document that's been being passed around about the Woodbridge at the top of the charts. And I'll start by saying I do agree with the title, Woodbridge at the top of the charts, by indicating I think we're one of the top town around. So, but that's about the only thing I agree with in this document. Unfortunately, it's certainly a non-scientific chart. If those of you haven't seen it, it lists 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 towns compared to Woodbridge, and talks about per capita spending, and we're at 2,144, and for example, Woodbury is at 962. Now, how Woodbury is at 962, and I'll get into that, and we're at 2,144 is beyond me. Basically, I think what the people, this is the people that give credit to this is the Woodbridge Republican Town Committee. From what I can gather, they took the budget from each town, removed education from that, and then divided it by the population to come up with a per capita expenditure figure. Now, let's start with per capita. I mean, it's a difficult concept because, for example, in Woodbridge, we have a serious building restriction that we can only build on acre-and-a-half lots. And quite frankly, when I served under Russ Stoddard, he said way back then that there was very little quality land left to build on. So there are no building projects to be had in Woodbridge which would expand our population and get our per capita down. Open space. Woodbridge aggressively has pursued open space. And for example, when we bought the Wallace property way back when, I believe that was targeted for over 200 houses. And we took it off the market. Of course, there's been many other open space purchases which have restricted the ability. There really is no room in this town for any expansion. So the only per capita growth we're going to get is as people move out, empty nesters move out, and people move in with families. But again, we've got a great elderly tax relief program where people's taxes are frozen if their income is at a certain level. So for example, somebody like Andy, somebody like me, I mean, our taxes aren't frozen, but we're not in any hurry to move. But for someone on restricted income.
We're not retired.
Yeah, I know, and you're also not on restricted income. It's really, you can stay in Woodbridge and your taxes aren't going to go up. So, again, per capita. Many of these towns have condominiums. I know Madison has numerous condominium projects. Cheshire has tons of condominiums. And I could go on. North Branford has a big, North Lakes or whatever, huge. And of course, and even Orange, which is on here. And that would drive up, or drive down actually per capita, because you've got a lot of people on a 10-acre piece of land with condos. You've got a lot of people living there. Of course, the same people who put this together are fighting us to no end to build 50 units up at the Woodbridge Country Club. So per capita, it's a difficult concept because our population is stagnant. It's not going to grow to any great extent because, first of all, there's no place for housing projects to be built. There's no condominiums. So we'll start with that. As far as the towns go, Tony, I've spoken to Tony on several occasions, and there's just the only way we could answer this, and I don't think we're going to answer it, but we would have to literally get a budget and go through it and understand each and every item, and everybody budgets differently. Now, a lot of these towns are K through 12. They don't have a regional school district or whatever, which, and the only reason I mention that because they're taking education out is for debt service. In Woodbridge, of course, our debt service is carried, or Beecher Road debt service is carried in our budget, whereas there's many towns where the debt service is carried in the education budget. So if you remove the education budget, you're removing a huge number, that being debt service. Is that the case in all these? I don't know. But without Tony and I literally picking one of these, sitting down, going through the way they do things, and probably having to call the town to discuss how they do things. Tony mentioned one thing in particular that he knew, and that I think is in Weston.
Weston, yeah.
The trash removal or solid
waste
is in a special revenue fund. So it's not in their budget. They keep it out of their budget. And there's a lot of other areas that could probably
Right, so you have to
treat
go
it
through
the
the
same
audit
way.
as well as the budget.
Correct.
Right.
And that would make it very difficult. Woodbridge has a pretty significant recreation budget, and we offer great programs. We have a great department, but they're saying don't consider revenues, but we have a tremendous amount of revenue from recreation, which offsets this program. Now, there's towns out there, some of these towns, that might not have this. They might have a very limited recreation budget, or they might have a recreation budget where they pay the whole thing and it's just not that much. So without being able to go through these types of things, it's very difficult to answer exactly. And quite frankly, Tony's a busy guy. I'm a busy guy. And I just don't see myself calling North Branford and let's take a look at your budget and go through it item by item.
I mean, I think also, Matt, that the tax revenue base is different.
Yeah.
We don't have a lot of commercial
Right.
activity
Right.
in Woodbridge, and therefore we don't have that amount of money to offset,
Right.
our residential tax.
Right.
There's, the issue of police departments, whether or not towns have them or not. Social services. Whether or not towns have those. So I think there are just so many sources of differences, it's very hard to really make sense out of that without putting a lot of time and effort
It's
into
not
it.
apples to apples.
Right.
Every town budgets differently.
And I think, based on the real acceptance by the town residents
Right.
of what our budget
As we saw the
is,
other night.
as we saw the other night, there's really not an issue. The people in the town are happy with what the services are that they get and, living in this town.
And I think you look at it vertically, like how are we doing in our town? Are we getting the services we want? How is our education? How's our police service? And you look vertically up and down on your town rather than across towns. And I think that there's so many differences to make the exercise meaningless and a waste of anyone's
I also
time.
point out, we spend a lot of money on our roads. We do.
Yes,
We have
we
a
do.
very significant,
Absolutely.
more so than probably many towns.
Yes.
I know it's 720, but it's more than 720. But our roads are in great shape. I was saying last night I had to go to a softball game up in Bethany, and I turned onto Luke Hill Road, which is the main road that takes you to the middle school. It's a mess. The road is a mess. It needs to be reclaimed, quite frankly. And I don't know that I just found out Bethany's budget's going to referendum. I don't know that they have the funds, but we have a great program. Our roads are fantastic. And if there's a problem, you call Public Works, they take care of it. So our roads are salt and sand. You heard about all these towns this year that were running out of salt and sand. We didn't run out of salt and sand because we have it. And I think, to me, this is a I don't want to say a slap, but at us, the Board of Finance. We go through these budgets thoroughly with the Board of Selectmen, with the departments, et cetera. Can anybody honestly think of an expense in this town that is excessive? I can't. I really can't. Now, staffing, are we going to start reducing staffing? I know a lot of these towns maybe have less people in their various, but we have a terrific finance department. Bethany has none. They don't even have a finance director.
I think you have to take a look at the auditor's report.
Correct.
Take a look at the auditor's report.
Right.
Take a look at the amount of accolades and awards that Tony has won over the years for what we do. I think that, I think we're good fiduciaries, and I think we're good fiduciaries for taxpayers in town. We do our job.
And as Sandy said, I think there were 10 people, other than people who had to be there the other night. I've learned in this town, when people are interested in something, they come out. Tony said there was an issue with some blasting. People were coming out left and right. I truly believe that people in this town are satisfied with the way it's being run, the services that are being rendered. And again, sure, we could get down to a 0% increase, but we'd have to eliminate the roads program. We'd have to cut education budgets. We'd have to cut everything. It would just be too difficult. And I just don't get a sense that the people in this town want us to do this.
I think the people in town are knowledgeable enough to know.
Exactly.
But if you neglect it, you're either going to pay now or pay later. Be upfront, take care of things. Don't let them get into such a state that it's going to be a big impact. Like you said, we're prudent.
To a large degree, part of the problem, even what we're experiencing now, even with Beecher, part of the problem is the can did get kicked down the road.
Right.
Okay? True. And basically, and what we really want to do for the future to see to it that we don't do that. That's our job. We're stewards of our infrastructure, and it's our job to maintain it. And I think the taxpayers want it maintained. They don't want to have it fall apart, then all of a sudden come to them in 10 years and say, oh, by the way, it's going to cost you $10 million to fix up this building. That's not what they want. I think the plans and the way it's being done is the right way, and I think they support that. They support that. And if they didn't support it, they'd vote differently.
I don't think a lot of towns could say how happy they were during all those storms. How well pleased they were with the maintenance and the cooperation and the safety of our roads. And like you said, just driving on any road, because you don't have to go far out of any town line.
You know, immediately we leave Woodbridge.
Yeah, to know. I mean, you could almost close your eyes and feel.
Lawrence was here a while ago, and I said, New Haven, you drive in some of these streets in New Haven, I mean, most of the streets in New Haven, they're a mess.
The potholes, but to make a comment about when the taxpayers are when the AstroTurf program was submitted and the taxpayers were not interested in that, they came out and they were heard. So when there's issues that they do not support,
That's a good point.
they come out and you hear their voice. Now, we went to a town meeting on Monday that maybe 10 townspeople showed up at. The rest of the people there were committee members, and police chief was there, but
Boards and
10,
commissions.
yeah, that's exactly right. We had 10 taxpayers show up at that meeting.
So again, I mean, for anybody who's gotten this, I don't know, I mean, I wish Tony and I had enough time to do this, but there just not enough hours in the day. And I would be skeptical of how, first of all, I'd be skeptical why these towns, Simsbury up north, Avon up north, I mean, what towns are on the other side of the curve that were just left off because they didn't meet the needs?
I thought they said they did it they tried to do it based on population, but look,
Okay.
but that's not the point. The point is, you made the point before, we're not comparing apples to apples.
No.
And that's the real thing. And I don't think, there's just too many differences. Okay, it's just not comparing these things because we're not all equal. And everything we do and the way we do it.
And I truly believe if they handed these out, they've handed these out for a while now, if people looked at this, they would have been in our meeting to start, what's going on here? How can this possibly be? So, I haven't heard a comment yet on it, so I don't think it's getting as much, but, if they're gonna keep putting stuff like this out without any further details, I find it hard to believe that a town like Simsbury, although again, a lot of these towns have tremendous amount of commercial Route 1 going through them or whatever. And
Well, not to be disrespectful, but I wouldn't put as much weight into
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
than I would for the weeks and months that auditors were here and issued a report.
Right.
I think you and Tony's picture in the paper said a lot more about
so again,
with the award.
it's been out there. Again, I haven't heard. Nobody's ever said anything to me, but I truly believe that people in this town are happy with what's going on. They're happy with the service, and until I hear otherwise, I'll continue to operate my end of the Board of Finance the way we have. Again, we do scrutinize every expense. I honestly would be hard pressed to tell you that there's an expense out there getting out of the hundreds for dues or whatever. Any significant expenses that are over are not reasonable. So how these numbers come to pass is beyond me. But for Tony and I to spend the amount of time it would take, we tried to do it quickly, and he came up with a couple of quick things.
Just a couple of major items that
Yeah.
I knew just by looking, but
It would be a major
involved.
So if the people who put this together would like to maybe give us more specifics.
Well, I think you have the support of the Board of Finance to kind of just let this,
Yeah, no, I'm not-
rest at this point.
We tried. Tony and I were going to, and I said, Tony, think about it. How are we going to do this without completely grasping a particular budget from a town to see what the differences are the way we budget?
Well, and again, if the residents were asking us to really do
Right.
this because they were unhappy,
Yeah.
then I think we're compelled to actually look at what else should we be doing differently.
And again,
But
it would be
there's not-
painful to cut this budget
Yeah.
as far as coming up with the numbers necessary to get to a tax decrease or to get down to cut our expenditures from 2,000 to 1,300, so $800 per capita. That's a fortune.
Well,
It's a
and I think
fortune.
you have to look over the last, 4 to 5 years, what our percentage increases have been,
Right.
which is extremely low.
True.
We had a couple years where it was less than 1%.
Right.
This is the highest increase that we've had in, 4 years. And
our
it's
du-
less than 2.5%.
And our duty is not to scrutinize the budgets of other towns, it's to scrutinize ours,
Right.
and that's what we've been doing.
Right.
And that's the real comparison.
It's a great
And that's what
point.
It's a good
that's
point.
what we've done.
Yep.
And Matt, if I could just say something about it, this is my first time going through the budget process as first selectman, and I have been so impressed by every aspect of the budget process, starting with the town departments who come in with their budgets. And, you've talked about this before, but the level of trust between the departments and the Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen makes such a huge difference in where we even begin. But that said, they came in with about what would have resulted in about a 6% increase. The Board of Selectmen worked hard to get it down just under 3%, and I just want to thank the Board of Finance and commend you for getting it down under 2.5%, but keeping all those essential services. We look at timing, you looked at when we need to do things to get the budget manageable, and as you've all mentioned, the annual town meeting on Monday night was really remarkable to me, that although there were not many people there, but even among the people who were there were no questions, no requests for changes, and it was about a 10-minute meeting. So I think it was actually, I was going to put it in my report tonight to thank you all so much for the great work you do, and I hope that people understand this is a totally volunteer board, and the many, many hours you put in to scrutinize the budget and to make sure it works for the town. So I just want to say thank you.
And just a small addition to we have to commend all the department heads, because I will tell you this, when we go ask them to sharpen their pencils, they sharpen their pencils and they come back to us and they do it willingly. No one complains about it. They're cooperative. They cooperate in the process. And I think that's fantastic. And all their budgets are open books. And they cooperate in the process. That says a lot for, right from the bottom all the way to the top, the way this thing goes together. And it's, and they deserve a lot of credit for what they do too. They are they're watching our dollars too.
We have wonderful people.
They're watching our dollars too.
Department after department after department. And as Andy said earlier, we're taxpayers too. Our taxes are affected by our decisions, but again, I mean, I get up in the morning, I drive out of my driveway when it snows, and then I hit New Haven, and it's all over. I get down to New Haven and into Hamden where I work, and that's where the similarities end. Our streets are well plowed, they're sanded. Our library, I mean, I don't want to pick any departments, but our human services, our library, we have tremendous services in this town. And to change anything, it's going to have to be an outcry from the public, which I've never heard. So I just didn't think, it's out there, and perhaps maybe somebody would like to. I'll be honest with you, even Michael Luther, who's been fairly quiet, was completely stunned by that, and he wrote a detailed letter and sent it to the New Haven Register, and they called him back and said, "You have to email it to us." And he said, "What's that?" So even Michael answered it, because he said mathematicians can't look at things like this. So we'll leave it at that. But hopefully, if people feel strong enough about it, we'll hear about it. So with that, we'll go to Tony's report.
Okay. Our monthly report for April is a budgetary surplus of just under $50,000. We have a tax revenue surplus projected at $80,000. We have an intergovernmental revenues are projected to experience $140,000 surplus, mainly due to a town road aid, additional $120,000 in town road aid that we have not budgeted. Golf revenues, as we discussed previously, is a little under $780,000 shortfall. There's a corresponding surplus in expenditures, as you know. Interest rates are about $25,000 shortfall this year. Country Club of Woodbridge experienced a surplus of about $365,000. The Center Building is projected to experience a surplus of $16,000, and that primarily due to natural gas savings. And that was a home run with that building, because the amount of oil we used to use over there was incredible. Because most of our, you remember how much we used to use? Police officer overtime is currently about $68,000 over budget, largely due to the short personnel, which they're making some strides and some gains on. We will continue to monitor this with the chief, and there is currently right now, we believe, a surplus in several wage accounts to assist in covering the shortfall. So we don't think we have to go outside their budget at the moment. For instance, in addition to wages, when you have particularly a vacancy, or when we're reimbursed by workers' comp, there's a surplus there in wages. But additionally, there could be a surplus in, if you have a vacancy, longevity, because there's no one there, or holiday pay. There's other accounts that it ripples through when you have vacancies. So we are keeping track of all that and hope to cover that shortfall. Waste management is a surplus of about $75,000, and that was when I was writing this report. We'll update to that is that the oil water separator issue at the fire department. We're currently in the process of testing, and we discovered that the oil water separator, we had a licensed environmental professional out to the site to assist us. That's essentially, it was actually the same firm that helped us with the big dig. And what they discovered was that it was installed improperly, and that weren't proper seals on the pipes going in and out of the separator.
Nice.
Apparently there's a certain oil resistant seal you have to put on a caulk of some
That
kind.
makes sense.
Right. So apparently it was not there, and that was part of the leak. And then the pipes were not pitched properly, which indicates there was settling, which means there wasn't proper footings and drainage underneath the tank. All that wasn't done according to specifications. So we filed an insurance claim, and our insurance did not accept the claim.
Right.
So we are currently looking down that, researching that, and making sure that we've looked into that thoroughly, and Jerry's helping us with that, and so we're making sure that we've.
Who was responsible for installing this?
So I'm going to get to that.
Okay.
He's also helping with going after the contract.
Is that a separate contractor or the general contractor?
Well, we had a contract with Newfield Construction.
Well,
So
they were the
They're
GC.
general.
they were
And
the
he
GC.
hired the subs
That
that
was
did this?
subbed out to a different firm,
Are they still in business?
as far as I know. Yeah.
So if it's a faulty installation, I don't
Yeah.
think there's a warranty on something.
So then
like that.
there's soil implications, and we're testing soil and groundwater, and that's what we're waiting for. The groundwater, it takes longer to get the results. The soil, there's some minor spillage around the leak that we may have to remove the soil. The state has indicated that we have to also remove the oil water separator and replace it completely. So there's a short-term issue here with funding, but perhaps in the long run, hopefully we'll get it all back.
Yeah.
So.
What are we looking at, Tony?
Well, I don't have a complete budget yet. We've spent close to $20,000 so far in professional fees, and we had to uncover the whole thing and dig it out and excavate the oil water separator, and we put monitoring wells in for the water to test the groundwater. This is all DEP regulation.
Mm-hmm.
So we spent close to 20. So assuming we got to replace the oil water separator, I don't know, close to 50 maybe. I'm not sure. It depends on the groundwater, really. That's the next big hurdle.
It all lends itself to the contractors you hire. You got that project, which has been a headache,
Right?
and you got this project, which has been an absolute pleasure.
That's true.
It's amazing what a difference a contractor can make in a project. So
So,
we had nothing but issues over there.
Mm.
So
So
more to come.
So I think there was some talk about putting in a new oil water separator in a place different from where it is now.
Yeah, we talked about that also, yeah.
Okay.
And we just want to make sure that we have the legally the process with make sure we're doing all the right things so that we can when we can have enough evidence to
Right.
make our case that it was the contractor's fault. But yeah, that's another issue.
Right, because the issue now is that they're not able to use the bays and not able
Right.
to.
So we may put it in a
wash
different
the-
spot
wash the-
if it takes time to work all this out. So that they can resume the,
Do they have to dry wash the trucks, is that it? Can't wash the trucks with water.
so that's
Get your
that issue.
washcloth.
So we'll be hearing more about this.
Yes, you'll have more on that, absolutely. And then employee benefits, the surplus is about $60,000. Those are our highlights.
Okay. Woodbridge Board of Ed, I'm sure Sandy will go over this. Okay, funding requests. We have several. The first is 13-14-25, it's a line item transfer. And it's merely to transfer funds, a couple of police vehicles were sold, and the revenue from those, or the proceeds from those, are being moved into the vehicle replacement to offset the cost of new vehicles. I'll move acceptance of line item transfer 1314-25 in the amount of $4,856.25.
Second.
Any discussion on this? All those in favor? Aye? Okay. Next is a request for funding, and this is to cover banking fees, which are, of course, more because we get a 99% of interest on
That's
the
true.
money. Maybe that's even high.
That's a little high, actually.
Actually, we probably have to pay the bank to keep our money.
The
so-
actual fees themselves are like $50 difference from last year. I mean, that's how close the actual fees are. It's not because of an increase in fees, it's because of the,
So whereas in better years, the money we kept in the funds, in our accounts, paid all the fees. That's not happening anymore. So I'll move acceptance of request for funding 1314-26 in the amount of $7,000. I hear a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Not much choice. Okay. Next is a line item transfer in the police department to cover the cost of radar unit repairs and maintenance. It's for $2,000. And I'll move acceptance of line item transfer 1314-27, the amount of $2,000.
Second.
Any discussion on this? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. And, okay. This is, I talked to Tony about this thing. The playground that's being constructed over at the, is it the Alleghi property?
yeah.
The town was responsible for preparing the site,
Right.
whatever. Well, I guess they had to move it. Why don't you, Tony, why don't you?
Okay, sure. So when the concept originally came up, it was a site that was a certain site. I don't know if you've ever seen the map, but it was on a certain site on the property, and so the town had agreed at that point to prepare the site. At the time, we had thought that Public Works would be able to do that, and but we weren't going. There was going to go after some grants for the actual playground. And when I say prepare the site, I just mean make it so it's flat, not any of the site work related to the actual playground. This is just to prepare the site. Well, apparently there were some wetland issues and the site had to be moved. And at the time, this wasn't researched thoroughly. So this just came up maybe a month ago, you think? I'm not even sure. Not even.
I think it's more recent.
It could be a little more recent. So we had to move it to another site on the property, and that particular site, we've searched for other spots. I mean, there's other issues on that property with in terms of location, and had to be sort of near the parking, but away from the, there's a lacrosse field, soccer field. So anyway, the site that was chosen, there's a need for some fill in stone and pipe in order to prepare the site properly. There's a high water table there, and there's some other issues. West Rock Materials, which is Warren, has agreed that he would do that all the site work free for no labor charge.
That's Warren Luciani.
Warren Luciani,
not
I'm
Warren
sorry,
Connors.
Warren Connors. Warren Luciani would do it at no cost for labor, but that we would just pay for materials.
Wow. Wow.
So that's what this is to fund materials. And it's a sort of a not to exceed figure. Whatever we need, we'll use, but this was just a conservative estimate of what was, could possibly be required. And just to give you a scope of the project, the grant was $200,000 and from the state. And then there was another 60, it was around 60, I don't remember the exact amount, $60,000 grant from the actual playground equipment company. And there's also a non-profit called Pease Place, I think,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
They've maybe raised close to 50. So it's actually a $300,000 project in various funding sources. And this is just to prepare the site.
So if they probably can continue to raise funds.
Correct.
Which might offset some of this.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
sure
right.
that it's an ongoing
Correct. They're going to
fundraiser.
continue to raise funds, and some of their funds are pledges, but they don't have the cash, and so, they're going to continue to raise funds, and to the extent they have funds remaining, it's either going to go into the playground or come back to the town for maintenance and upkeep.
And assuming they have a contingency in their fund.
There is.
It might be over budgeted. We might.
Yeah,
so-
there's conservative
So we might get a
estimates for
chunk of this money
expenses,
back.
and they're going to get stuff donated, and so there's a good possibility we can get some of this back. Absolutely.
Did the Board of Selectmen approve the current location then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the location was based upon a recommendation by Terry Gilbertson. He recommended moving the site.
Okay.
Again, this is a transfer. It's not coming out of our contingency.
Right. So it's coming from
Boiler
the boiler project, which we received about $60,000 reimbursement from UI for putting in high efficiency boilers.
That's great.
So.
Okay, any other questions on this? Do we have a, no.
Yeah, you have to make a
So I'll make a motion that we approve line item transfer 1314-28 in the amount of $13,835. Any discussion? All those in favor? I think the playground's a worthwhile project. A lot of children are gonna use it. And I know it's handicap accessible. So
Correct,
it's gonna
yeah.
be a good project.
Yeah.
So hopefully there'll be some surplus funds. Okay, approve the minutes. The first minutes we have are our regular Board of Finance minutes from April 24th. And I'll move acceptance of the minutes of April 24th as presented. Any corrections, adjustments to these minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain. Next is our, the minutes, wow, from Monday night.
How about that?
Yeah.
I was very impressed here.
Okay. This is where we set the mill rate, so I'll move acceptance of the minutes of the Woodbridge Board of Finance on Monday, May 19th, 2014 as presented.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Okay. Preliminary suspense list. This is a formality, right, by
Right.
state statute?
Correct.
where- Why don't you explain it?
So the suspense list is a state, it's like Matt said, state statute, and what happens is, we take certain taxes that are due under certain circumstances. Typically, it's motor vehicle and personal property, and we put them on the suspense list, which takes them off our tax collector's report of properties that are outstanding in terms of our tax collector's report. But we don't stop trying to collect on them. They just come off the our tax liability or our tax payable number, if you will. So that's essentially it.
Is it because they're so far overdue?
Right.
that
Yes,
it's-
correct.
It's based on. yeah,
Oh, it's based over on age, correct.
age, but they continue to be.
We still try to collect them,
collect.
and there still has an active collection. It's just doesn't. It's not part of our rate book, and it's part of our collectible.
Okay. Any questions on that?
And that's we report that in our audit every year, so that's why we try to do it before.
Do you
June.
want us to approve that, or it's?
No, this is preliminary.
Just
Next
an
month will
FYI?
be approval. Yeah.
Okay. Appointment of auditors.
We're in our fourth year of a 4-year bid from McGladrey and Pullen. So I would request permission to use them for our auditors this year.
This is for fiscal year 14?
14, yeah.
Okay. Well, fiscal year,
15.
14,
let's see, year ended 14.
Yeah,
That
year
would be
14.
13/14.
yeah. 11, 12, 13, and 14 were the 4 years. So then what we'll do is next spring, we'll go out to bid again.
I'll make a motion.
This is the fourth year of
Of a
four-year
four-year
contract.
Well, it was a bid that we did, and
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
I will make a motion that we appoint McLeodry and Pullen as our auditors for the audit period July 1st, 2013 through June 30th, 2014.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Ellen?
Thank you. Well, the first thing I'd like to mention is that this evening at 7 o'clock, the Connecticut Department of Transportation will be over at the Senior Center in the lounge, in the cafeteria downstairs, to talk about plans for the Exit 59 interchange. And any of you who are available after this meeting, I encourage you to attend. Anyone who's watching and can still get over there at 7 o'clock. It's very important for DOT to see how important the project is for the town of Woodbridge. That's the first thing. And also in terms of upcoming events, on May 29th at 7 p.m. in the Center Gym is the second part of the Plan of Conservation and Development charrette, which is an exercise where people can express their views about their vision for the future of Woodbridge: housing, open space, zoning, traffic, anything at all. The first part of this was this past Saturday, and it was terrific. There were about 70 people turned out, and they were all very interesting and enthusiastic discussions. So anyone who couldn't make it, I encourage you to go on the 29th. I also want to give you some very good news, if you hadn't heard it, that the town has received a $500,000 steep grant, and that's for sidewalk and paving improvements as well as outdoor lighting at Beecher Road School. So over the next couple of years, Beecher School is going to be really shining. This is a grant that was rejected last year.
Right.
Tony and I worked on making some changes to it and advocating strongly for it. $500,000 is the maximum you can get for a steep grant. So that was terrific news. I just want to mention a few things from this past month. One was the Senior Center volunteer tea. The Human Services has been recognizing its volunteers in this annual tea for about 20 years. Mary Ellen LaRocca started it. And it's so significant because volunteers do so much for the town. And of course, they're recognizing volunteers in Human Services, but we have volunteers helping in every aspect of the town, and I just wanted to thank all of you again for the work on the Finance Committee, which is one of the most important areas where we really need attention to detail and dedication of volunteers. So thank you so much for that. I also continue to meet with Mayor Hart monthly to see if there are ways we can encourage cooperation or look at areas of common interest like Exit 59 between our two towns. We also met with our two police chiefs with us to see if there were ways that they could also enhance cooperative efforts. So that's very important, I think. I had mentioned last time that the Inland Wetlands Agency and Fire Commission had reached a settlement, and on May 5th, the court approved the settlement and actually complimented us for getting there and recognizing what a difficult issue it was and how important it was for the town to reach agreement. Another big issue that we're dealing with is the United Illuminating tree trimming program. United Illuminating was here on May 15th to explain the program. It was not very well attended, but there was a great deal of information given out, and the Ordinance Committee is meeting now to see if there are regulations or an ordinance that we should put in place with respect to permitting for tree work that will help assure that we have the right balance between trimming, cutting down hazardous trees, and assuring electricity reliability in storms, and yet protecting trees that do not need to be cut down. It's a very difficult issue, but we've been working on that, and we'll see if we can put something in place for permitting requirements in town. A similar issue arose last night. You mentioned it, Matt. There are some issues about blasting up on Peck Hill Road, the new development up there. There's been blasting for one house that's under construction, and the residents are very concerned about the strength of the blasts. And that's another area we're now looking to see if we can implement an ordinance in Woodbridge that is more restrictive and protective of homeowners and wells and water than the state standard. Right now, we operate under state statute, so we're looking into that. We already talked about the annual town meeting, which was just terrific. Compliments to everyone. And I think those are the highlights.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Liaison reports. I was not able to attend the last Amity meeting, but I did look over the paperwork, and there's nothing major going on there. There's going to be a year-end balance, which I think I reported before. There was some serious concerns about their self-insured health plan, so they might want to move health. Yeah, they might want to move money into that to cover. But
They can have anything to return?
I don't know. I'll find out at the next meeting.
Okay.
I'll find out. I know how much that means to you, Tom. But at this point, there's a lot of things they want to do, so that's a good question. But then again,
I thought the choice was either return money to the town or fund their health service accounts.
they could fund anything they want. You know, there's other things they want to do too. Seal a parking lot. And so we'll go through those one by one at the next meeting, and I'm sure I'll report back to you at our next meeting.
When they presented their budget, we were talking about them using some of that money
Right.
to do that,
Yeah.
and even to offset the budget. And they decided not to do that.
Mike, you have anything?
Fire Commission met on Monday. The main topic was the oil-water separator, and went through that exhaustively. The other thing, just about their budget, they're saying it's a little too soon to tell how close they're going to be in terms of keeping to their budget. May go over just a little, but they're not sure just yet. It's it'll go down to June 30th as to whether or not how close they get. They also talked about the Fire Association buying the EMS, the compressor that is now on one of the EMS vehicles. The Fire Association went out and bought that, and I think they demonstrated it during the Board of Selectmen meeting.
They did.
Yeah. And
It's
also,
impressive.
yeah.
You don't want to be the subject of it.
And the association also mulched and landscaped the area around the firehouse. Aluminum was corroded on Rescue 1. It's a 2008 truck. We're on the hook for $2,000, but the majority of it was picked up by the manufacturer because of the corrosion due to their workmanship. Engine 7 out to bid, scheduled to go out to bid next week. Specs have been concluded. Shed committee is going to meet soon, and the patio, as part of the settlement that needs to be fixed and moved, will probably have to be coordinated with the work around the oil-water separator because they're so close in proximity. And that's it.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, well, I missed EMS because of the town meeting, and then I heard it was like a 20-minute meeting, so but I was not there. Human Services met on May 5th. For youth services, the after-school programs are going well. They did babysitting training, digital photography, and there was a kickball tournament May 16th. And they did have a semi-formal that they said was absolutely wonderful. 120 students attended. The boys and the girls really dressed up and had just an incredible time. The social worker, Mary DiStilio, turned in her resignation, and I believe that's still out to bid.
Yeah, there's still, I don't think they've had.
Yeah, she's going to continue to work until June 17th, and her position has been advertised in the papers. The town, well, they talked about the capital budget, the buses that they need. One of them, 2008 bus, was leased by the Greater New Haven Transit District, and they were given the opportunity to purchase that for $4,400 as it was coming off of the lease. It's very well maintained. Our own town maintains it, so they feel very confident. So they did talk to Tony. There were some funds that from the original purchase. So between using those funds, they were able to cover the rest with line item transfers, and they feel that they'll get several years out of that. Additionally, Mary Ellen did apply for a state DOT grant to purchase the bus. Not exactly sure how that will go, but she made every effort, and the recipients will be announced in June. And, some other good news. The Woodbridge Rotary made a generous donation of $1,500 to the Human Services, to the Senior Center, actually. And they're trying to start a duplicate bridge game, but they will not have enough card tables to do so, and they were going to use that donation to purchase additional card tables. Those are the highlights.
Thank you. Dr. Esposito?
Most of the meeting of the Board of Commissioners was in executive session, personal issues. But obviously, Tony already in his report talked about the major issue is this overtime in their budget. And that's due to the fact that they are down. Now they have one officer has been on workman's compensation leave for 14 months. And they have another one in therapy. So they've been down. So the question is asked, what happens after 14 months? Will they have a hearing? And I could start this again. And so we're hoping that that gets resolved. That's a long time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that was basically it. I mean, that was basically it.
Okay.
And again, overtime is due to the fact
Yep.
we're down too many officers.
Yeah.
There are too many officers out of action.
So how do you, so what's the standard of care in terms of managing that issue? Like, so you got a guy who's out 14 months.
It's all dictated by their contract.
Okay.
This is all comes under the union contract, what dictates that.
And I'm not talking necessarily about what you do about the guy who's been out for 14 months. I'm talking about how do you continue staffing. Like, what are the recommendations? Because this must happen all the time. We're not the only one.
No, but there are one new officer was finished school and was the last meeting was introduced, and I said that we had met him at that meeting, and there's 2 more that are in training, and we also have one officer that's assigned to the state. We have Beecher, the high school, and an officer that is serving on the state narcotics squad. That's where he goes to work every day. So then you're down some other people. So, I mean, that takes a toll. So some of these issues have to get resolved. And I think with the new officers coming on board, they will.
That'll help, sure. Because they're not available to be on duty. Right?
No.
Speaking of the police commission, one of the things that we brought up at the Board of Selectmen is that at the next police commission meeting, they will be speaking with a consultant who's going to do a study of the budget and staffing of the police commission. This was an issue that was raised by Selectman Dye and Anastasio. They were concerned about that, and the police commission agreed to do a study. I think you all received the email from those 2 selectmen who said that they have additional information that they thought was relevant to the study. So I encourage them to get that information over to Chief Marcucci or attend the meeting of the police commission. And because if there are questions they have or data they think should be included in the study, this is the time to get it out there. So since I think you all were copied on the emails, I want to make sure you know that.
And so there's a consultant hired to do the study.
I don't think they actually have to hire him. There's an organization
Oh, okay.
that
It's
does
South
this
Central
for.
Connecticut
Yeah.
Criminal Justice.
Great.
His name is Charles Sherwood, and that's all part of the South Central Connecticut Justice. So he would be the one that
That's
would
great.
report, yeah.
That's good.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Ellen.
The Woodbridge Library Commission met on Monday, May 12th, and the Friends had their annual meeting. They had a good turnout, and they do have officers for the next year. They've initiated their annual appeal, but they're only about 65% of where they were last year. So for anybody who's watching, you should have received a request for a donation to the Friends of the Library, and all of that money gets turned over to the library. So the library counts on that as part of their, to cover some of their expenses during the year. So they would like to be able to at least fund it at the same level as the year before. The elevator is still not operational. They're waiting for, I guess, a new CPU board to get
What
delivered
was that
and
meeting?
installed. This was May 12th. Was it delivered?
I think so, yeah.
Oh, that's great.
I think so.
It was only supposed to take a day for them to do the
They
installation.
were out there
And
installing it sometime this week.
that's great.
So-
I mean, what Todd had said is that it should be done by the end of the month, so
Yeah.
that fits in with that schedule. The public has been very understanding, more so than what Todd had anticipated, but they are helping people carry things up and down stairs. People come with strollers. They want to go to the children's, portion of the library. So they've been able to make it work. The Policy and Personnel Committee is going to be doing the director's review soon. And Todd actually did a survey of library patrons to try to better understand this issue of summer hours, use of ebooks, things like that. And over a 10-day period of time, they had 300 responses. He was just amazed that there was such a great level of participation. Friday afternoons during the summer are the slowest hours of the week. And Todd had wanted to find out, would the patrons be receptive to closing earlier on Friday and then opening up for a certain number of hours on Saturday. So they'd be open for another day of the week during the summer. And there was actually support for that from the respondents to the survey. 81% said that they would visit the library on a Saturday if it was open, and 58% of the people were in support of actually changing the hours on Friday afternoon and opening on Saturday. So this is not something that Todd is going to pursue this year, but he's going to kind of put it into the agenda for the following year, so the staff can actually plan on staffing during those time periods, because they're not open on Saturday now. He'd have to have staffing for that. So the other thing is the use of ebooks is much higher than nationally. It's 28%, and basically he feels that the whole use of ebooks is related to the socioeconomic makeup of the town, and therefore that is an area that he definitely wants to grow in the future. And the other issue is that Hamden will join Lion in July. That's what they can actually work out. Okay. The other interesting thing is that they had a large amount of tax forms left over at the end of the year. So they're not going to order as many next year. It means that more people are doing their taxes online, which is a good thing. All right, Woodbridge Board of Ed. There is an additional $30,000 in savings that they anticipate receiving. They would actually like to put that towards the anticipated costs for the building upgrade, and for items that were not in the building project, some of the security items, and then window shades for the building itself. So they will have about $30,000 to return to the town. This doesn't kind of touch that piece of it. So I think that you can pretty much count on that for the end of the year. And we did also review the summer enrichment program budget, the extended day budget, and the school lunch program budget for next year. We had a couple of suggestions, and that was the entire meeting.
Okay. Anything else? Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Have a good Memorial Day, everybody.